Hello, and welcome back to the Emerge Stronger podcast. My name is Sonia, and I am here with my co host, Melody. And today we are talking about everyday habits and habits that the culture has normalized, but are quietly making our marriages heavier, colder, and more disconnected. A lot of people genuinely want deep love, but they have behaviors that make closeness very difficult. And so, if we don't confront that, we'll keep blaming marriage while ignoring the habits that are starving it. I'm going to start off by saying I know that I've had some really bad habits in the past that I had to break. And once I broke those, my marriage got better. I stopped
Me
making
too.
everything all about me.
Yeah, same here. Definitely have had some habits that were not good for the relationship.
Yeah. So let's talk about based off of that, when I said making it all about me, I think that is one habit that people tend to get into is they make everything about themselves, their needs, their peace, their truth, their triggers, their boundaries.
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of people come when they come to coaching, they want to do whatever they can to fix their spouse instead of really taking a look at them. And we try to coach them through that. You can't control what they do. You can
Mhm.
try to want to control what they do, but you're not going to be able to do it. And we have a very good way of being able to see all the faults in the other person and not look inward to see our own faults. And that's the thing is like, if you don't take a look at yourself first, then it's going to be really hard to influence your marriage in a positive direction. And I know that it's hard to look. Nobody wants to look in the mirror and say, I have these things. I can't say I'm sorry. I'm selfish. I'm this, I'm that. It's hard for us to do that. But in order for us to actually improve our marriages, we have to do that. We have to take a look
Mhm.
at ourselves.
Yeah. And when two people are so obsessed and pointing the finger at each other and not focusing on themselves, then it really leads to down a path of nowhere.
Mhm.
And you're not moving towards reconciliation. You're just so stuck with yourself and how you're hurt and what the other person did. And you're absolutely right. It's nothing changes if you don't look at yourself. And I think in a previous episode, I had asked you and Aaron that, like, what was the one thing that was most surprising to you going through this crisis that you weren't expecting? And the answer for both of us was, well, I wasn't expecting to have to change so much.
Yeah. I oftentimes talk to couples. Sometimes I talk to them together and sometimes I talk to them separately. And, they're looking for guidance or whatever. And I always say, it has to start with you. And I tell them
Hmm.
both the same thing, because if you wait around for your spouse to want to do something or whatever, you're going to be waiting a long time. And if you truly want change, you have to be the one that takes ownership of that. And a lot of people hesitate to do that because they have the mindset of, well, what if I change and they don't? But I'm going to tell you, there's no guarantees in relationships whatsoever. But if you change your behavior, you will influence that
Right.
relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to save it. Hopefully you do, but you have a much better chance of saving it if you begin to address your own negative behaviors or habits in your relationship than if you just ignore them. And again, you're just waiting for the other person to change, waiting for the other person to change. And man, you can wait 30 years and it never happened. But if you
Hmm.
take the reins over your own life and begin to say, maybe I have been selfish, or maybe I am overly critical, or, I make everything about me and I'm going to do whatever I can to change that, then it will positively influence the relationship. And even if it ends up just being a co parenting relationship, it will be better than when you weren't changed.
Yeah. And I would say, as Christians, Jesus has called us to serve one another. And I would challenge anybody that's listening to this, how are you serving your spouse? Or are you waiting for your spouse to serve you? And I think that was one of the biggest things that I had to recognize was sitting, wanting to be served rather than
Mhm.
serving him. And that changed tremendously for us. And like you said, I felt like once I started doing that, it wasn't that I was just the one serving, it was influencing the change because he recognized, well, how can I serve her?
Mhm. And, a lot of times people are like, well, it's not fair if I do A, B, and C, and he doesn't do A, B, and C, or she doesn't do A, B, and C, when it goes back to a previous episode, probably fairly recently, where I said, if you can't do it for the other person, then do it as unto God. You know,
Mm,
me and my husband were reconciling, there was a level of trust that had to be rebuilt, because I honestly didn't trust anything he said or did at that point. But I got to the place where I was just like, okay, Lord, I don't 100% trust him, but I do 100% trust you. And so I'm going to move forward. I'm going to continue to make changes. I'm going to continue to show up in this marriage as unto you. And that, I mean, there was a lot of different things that happened and took place, things that I did and things that he did that eventually like killed the marriage. But when we show up as unto the Lord, it totally changes the dynamic of the relationship. Again, there are no guarantees, because we all have free will, and we can decide what we wanted to do or not do, but it does positively influence. I think so many times when, I've helped couples, and whichever one was completely wanting to be out, if the one that wanted the marriage, was standing for the marriage, began to make changes, it always positively impacted the relationship. Now, at first, they're like, okay, the spouse that wants out is looking at the situation. Oh, they're trying to manipulate me. Oh, they're trying to get me to stay and all that. And there is not necessarily manipulation, but there is, there's a motivation of wanting to save the marriage. But that's why we always say, hey, check your heart, make sure your motivation,
mhm.
make sure you're wanting to do this because you want to be the best version of yourself, and not to manipulate an outcome, because that's not going to be good. But if you are truly changing who you are, recognizing the habits that you need to change, then it can influence it more than what you think.
Yeah. Well, I will say, as a person that wanted out of the marriage, and when time passed and I could see that my husband was making changes, I found that very attractive. In
Hmm.
the beginning, I refused to see anything because I did feel like it was manipulation, even though it wasn't. But as time went on and I started to see those changes happen, I was like, wow, this is different. Like, I want to get to know this new person. And along the way, I had to make a lot of changes as well.
Okay, so do we want to talk about some of the habits that people have that can
Yeah.
deep relationships?
One of the habits is treating discomfort like danger. And so this is the moment that tension appears, people shut down, they call it toxic, or they're just or they emotionally disappear.
Hmm. Okay, and I don't know where we got this in our heads that relationships are just supposed to be this Disney, and maybe that's where it came from, like the Disney mindset after, and Prince Charming is going to come and all that. But the truth of the matter is that relationships are very hard, because you have two different people from two different mindsets trying to merge their lives together. We all have our own family culture. Like, my family culture was completely different from David's family culture. And yes, there was friction there, but the Bible talks about iron sharpening iron. And if we will,
Hmm.
the discomfort of it. And that's the thing. Anything worth having, you have to fight for. Whether it's the next dime, or your health. You have to make sacrifices if you want to have a healthy lifestyle. Like, everything that we want, there's some type of struggle in it, and discomfort really, and pain, like heartache and pain, really is the best catalyst for us to achieve the goals, the relationship goals, the financial goals, the health goals, or whatever. That struggle is actually very good for us. But in the society today, it's like, oh, they hurt my feelings. And, people run to things like, oh, they emotionally abused me, or that. And I'm not saying that that stuff doesn't exist, because I know that it does. But sometimes your spouse is just being a butthead, and they'll
Yeah.
get over it. And then tomorrow they're going to be like the best thing since sliced bread. But we get so disenchanted with just a little bit of discomfort. That discomfort is so good for us. And it creates the environment where it can highlight what we need to change, what we need to change. Yeah. Our spouses definitely need to change. Like, there's definitely things that they need to work on too. You are not the only one that brings baggage to the relationship. but you are the only one that you can control. So discomfort is actually very good for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say for many years that I avoided any type of discomfort. And that stems from my childhood, feeling as though I had done something wrong. Oh no, I'm in trouble. What did I do?
Mhm.
And I remember my husband saying, like, I'm just trying to talk to you. I'm not accusing you. I'm not attacking you. I'm just trying to talk to you. And
Mhm.
so it took a while for me to recognize that within myself. Like, okay, we're just having a conversation. Doesn't mean that he's attacking me, doesn't mean that I'm wrong. It's just a conversation. And I can tell you right now that our marriage has improved tremendously by having these uncomfortable conversations. I can't even say that they're uncomfortable anymore. They're just conversations that have to be had.
Mhm. That's some reframing that you've done because you
Mhm.
see the benefits now of sitting in the discomfort or in the conflict. And, when we think conflict, we think high stress and disagreements and stuff like that. But conflict can also bring resolve, it can bring reconnection. I mean, we have makeup sex, that stuff is real. And sometimes the conflict does make it better at the end, and it brings understanding, and it helps you understand your spouse better, even helps you understand yourself better. Because sometimes in conflict, when I'm talking to David, I'm like, wait, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I need to change my mind about that situation. Whereas if I didn't have the conflict, there would be no reason for me to question my motives or question my thoughts. So conflict is actually very good, so sit in the discomfort sometimes.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next habit. And that one is validation addiction. So, this constant need of reassurance and praise and agreement. And it's just this emotional feeding that becomes so exhausting to live with.
Yeah. I have seen many marriages destroyed because of the validation addiction. I actually had one couple that I was working with, and she was a larger woman, and then she lost a lot of weight and she became like this fitness person. And so she was constantly posting stuff on Instagram, and that, her husband was like, okay, it's getting a little out of hand because, all these pictures all the time. I got it, you're taking the pictures. And she ended up telling him that those likes were more important to her than him. And
Wow.
so those were some deep wounds. Of course, it broke his heart because he wants to be the most important person in her life, right? But the relationship ultimately ended because the validation from the outside was too important to her. So there's
Hmm.
validation from the outside that you need, which will cause people to micro cheat or even all the way go to cheating. But then what tends to happen is they get the validation from that person. And because the need for validation actually comes from an insecurity that you have and not
Hmm.
your own worth. And so you're trying to derive your worth from somebody on the outside. But as soon as you get that validation, then you have to move to the next person. And so you have this habitual micro cheating, or it could be even full blown cheating with this person, that person, because you're seeking validation. But there's also the seeking validation within the relationship, that maybe you do have boundaries where you don't seek validation from the outside of the relationship, but you seek it so much that from your spouse or from your children, you need people to constantly stroke your ego. You go into people pleasing because you need to know that they love you, instead of you recognizing your own worth and loving yourself and really pressing into the Lord and allowing the Lord to show you how He loves you. You're seeking it from people then rather than seeking it from the source.
Yeah.
Problematic.
Very. Yes. And I think that that's why we are so big about sharing our faith and wanting people to understand how important it is that you know who you are within the Lord
Mhm.
and you have a relationship with the Lord. And that's something that, you do have to work at. But like you said, once you start kind of getting into that relationship with the Lord, then you do have this different type of validation, and you don't need validation from anybody else because you know who you are in Christ.
Mhm. And I can definitely say that there's been times in my life when I've been people pleasing. I don't feel like I do that now, but who knows? God can reveal anything to me. I could definitely be there, almost becoming overly sacrificial with time. And I mean, I remember a time in my life where every day of the week, except for Friday night, I was at some type of event doing something for someone, and it was encompassed within the church, right? I was down at the church every night of the week, and it robbed me of my time with my children. It robbed me of just peace and rest. And it was all
Hmm.
because I wanted to please, other people, because I just felt terrible about myself. I was not in a good place in my life. And so even if the things are positive, being involved in church and helping people, those things are good. But when you do it to the place where it depletes you completely, it robs you of your time with your family, that's also problematic. So we have to set boundaries. Another thing is too, like, if you're constantly needing validation within your marriage, that signals insecurity to your spouse. And I have seen it where one person can be completely secure in the relationship and another person can be insecure in the relationship and destroy the relationship,
Hmm.
because nothing they do seems to be good enough to make you feel secure, because you just need more and more and more and more.
And I feel like when that happens, it's almost like the bar gets even higher and higher. And then you have the person that's looking for this validation has these expectations of the validation from the other spouse, and the needs are never met. They will never be met until you know how to have a relationship with the Lord. And that's all the validation you need.
That's it. Almost everything that we're going to talk about goes back to your relationship with the Lord, because if you know who you are in Christ, then it settles all of that. I'm not saying that
Mhm.
you won't have those momentary lapses of insecurity, because you will, you'll insecurities will rise. But then if you shift your focus, like, one of the things I always do is say to myself, why am I feeling this way? Like, what is it within me that's going on? And then I try to separate from what I can control to what I can't, from what I can't control. And then the things that I can't control, I'm like, okay, Lord, here's the things, and I need you to help me fix these things, or heal this brokenness, or put it into a real perspective for me, so I don't let something that could be just minor completely control my life, my thinking, my decisions, and all of that. And it always goes back to the Lord. It always goes
Mhm.
back to allowing Him to heal those broken places in your life, so that you can be free from all the crap.
That's right. Praise Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, the next habit is confusing honesty with emotional dumping. And so that looks like the culture saying, like, be real. But many people use that as permission to be reactive, harsh, and uncontrolled. Emotional honesty is a virtue, emotional dumping is a habit. So you
Hmm.
really have to be careful with that emotional dumping.
Yeah. I've had conversations with people that are very close to me where they will do this emotional dumping, and they'll say, "Well, that's just who I am. And I'm just trying to be honest with you." But one of the things that we believe that it's not over is that you can speak the truth, but speak it in love.
Yeah.
You want to do that, because if you're just being harsh and critical and hateful and all of that, and then you call that "I'm just being real," then what you're actually doing is damaging the relationship. It's okay. You don't want to hold it back. Like, if there's a true issue in your relationship, you don't want to hold it back and avoid it and not communicate about it, because that causes damage too. But if you are using the four horsemen, if you're being critical,
Hmm.
contemptuous, and then it typically causes the other person to be defensive. Like, if you're doing that, then you actually are pushing your spouse further away from you. You're not bringing them. It doesn't mean, though, that you don't need to talk about the issues, because you do need to talk about the issues if there is one. But it's all in how you do it. You can speak the truth in love. And that's what I'm going to tell you. Journaling has just been like the best friend for me, because I am by nature very critical about things. I'm hard on myself too. I'm very critical of myself too, but I can be critical of others. And so one of the things that kind of removes the sting from me confronting an issue, and when I say remove the sting, where I'm not too harsh, is I journal about the stuff. It helps me put things, it de-escalates the fire behind that emotion. Because even if I'm right, I might be really right in the situation, but how I deliver that could be very, very wrong. And so if I journal, it kind of de-escalates that. Talking to a coach de-escalates that. Like definitely when I was in crisis, when I talked to my coach, he would put things into perspective, and I would just be like, "Ugh," and he'd be like, yeah, way too cold, way too harsh. You need to, calm down. It's okay for you to be mad. It's not okay for you to act like that.
Yeah.
And so using those tools to kind of process the emotion before you lash out. The problem is that we want resolve in when we're feeling very emotionally charged. That's when we want resolve. And then you have some people that want resolve in that moment, and they spew all the venom, and then they feel really guilty, you know
Hmm.
or they'll wait until they calm down, and then they won't address it at all. But if you manage those emotions and you really put them into perspective, it creates the environment where you can speak truth and love.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, listen to this. Emotional honesty without emotional responsibility is just immaturity with better branding.
Oh, yeah.
I know. Ouch.
Rough. That's rough.
Yeah.
True, but rough.
Yeah. Okay, next habit. Wanting grace but hating correction. Oh gosh, yes. It's the second someone is challenged, they explain, they defend, they reverse blame, or they withdraw. And this makes growth in a marriage nearly impossible.
Yeah, I hate this, but I've also wanted that. I want grace from my spouse, but I don't want to give it. I don't necessarily want to give it. Or if he confronts me about something, then immediately just trying to defend the position. Now, I've learned over time, and I've seen the disconnect, right? I've seen the disconnect when I would start trying to defend or whatever. Typically, though, I would say I probably start more arguments than because he just goes on about his happy life. And, so I tend to start more arguments. And there's times when he's more of the defensive one than me. But again, we've learned that, it's just problematic in the relationship. And so you got to own your stuff. You know,
Yeah.
y- you have to really take a look at yourself and say, yeah, I have been this way, or I have been that way. I would call myself a little bit of the fun police, because I'm like, let's take care of all the responsibilities before we have fun. And so, like, if he says, hey, let's go do this, and I mean, this just happened a couple of weekends ago. So it's legitimately still an issue in our marriage where oh, we have to do this, and we have to do this, and we have to do this. And then I did, after a few minutes, say, you know what, you're right. All this other stuff can wait. Let's just go to the beach.
Yeah.
But I have my agenda. I can get defensive of why I need it to be my way, and not good in a relationship.
I said this to someone recently, and I said, if I could give the best piece of marriage advice, just hear me out when I say this, don't take this literal. If I could give the best piece of marriage advice, it would be to stop talking. And what I mean by that is not everything needs a response.
Yep.
Because once somebody comes to you with some correction, and you're right, it's like, oh, I'm going to get defensive and I'm going to over explain, and then I'm going to try to blame you for it. Just stop talking and just sit in it for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your spouse comes to you and is like, hey, I have something to talk to you about, you don't need to respond. And it's not out of disrespect, it's more out of, let me process this before I say something that I'm going to regret.
So shut up. That's
We talk too we talk too much. We do. And seriously, not everything needs a response.
That's true.
Yeah.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
you can quietly disagree.
Yeah. And even if you do disagree, I mean, you can say, I respectfully disagree, but you don't even have to go into it. But
Let
yeah,
me tell you why you're wrong.
I'm good at that. But you're right. Sometimes you just need to shut up and listen to what they have to say, and then really evaluate, hey, does this have some truth to it?
Yeah.
Even if it's not, because you have her perspective over here, his perspective over, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so if your spouse has a complaint, more times than not, there's going to be some truth to that complaint. And you need to measure, okay, to what degree is what they're saying is correct.
Yeah. Okay, let's go one more. Let's talk about comparison poisoning contentment. So, social media has convinced people that normal marriage seasons, the quiet ones, the hard ones, mean that they chose the wrong person.
Mm. Okay. So you come in and out of connection and relationships. There's different reasons why we're committed. There's different areas of love, and you come in and out of those all the time. And I think a lot of times people think, oh, if I don't feel that warm, fuzzy butterfly feeling for the rest of our marriage, that it just means we lost that love and feeling. And the truth of the matter is, the butterfly, amazing feeling that you feel when you're first in a relationship will always die, because that's more of like an infatuation thing that starts, and sometimes
Hmm.
it grows into limerence and all of that. But it's always going to die because you have to get back to real life, you know. But you do want to be mindful of cultivating your relationship. Dr. Robert Sternberg talks about consummate love, how you have high levels of commitment, high levels of intimacy, and high levels of passion. But he says you visit there, you don't live there. And it's because we have to go to work, we have to mow the grass, we have to do the laundry, we take care of the kids, the parents, and all those types of things. And that pulls at your ability to be able to concentrate solely on commitment, intimacy, and passion in your relationship. And so you have to create moments of that, understanding that sometimes you are going to feel like a roommate, and that's okay as long as you're not disrespecting each other or anything like that. But you just have to be mindful. Okay, so we've felt like roommates for a while. Let's do what we can to reconnect. Let's increase our passion. Let's talk more, and this thing gets in the way a lot. We
Hmm.
allow it to get in the way. But whenever you're in a situation where you feel like you're just coasting, or you feel like you've lost some of that love and feeling, again, evaluate yourself. Like, what have I done? Have I pulled away from my spouse? Am I focusing too much on the happy couples or and on social media instead of really pouring my attention into my relationship? Because when you do that, when you pour your attention and your affection and just being curious about your spouse again, it creates connection, and it can give you what in anything on social media. Like, I don't want to say don't believe anything, but a lot of times, people just post every time pretty much people just post the best things of their life, the vacations that they're on, and all that kind of stuff. They post that, and I'm not saying that something's wrong with that. People think that this person has a certain lifestyle and their relationship is better than our relationship, and that's not necessarily true. You don't know what happens behind closed doors. But
Yeah,
stop
that's
worrying about
right.
it. Focus on your spouse.
Yeah. And you do need to be self aware. Am I doing this? Am I comparing myself? And we've talked about this in a previous episode, but it's so dangerous to sit there and look at a couple and start down the path of, he loves her. My husband doesn't love me that way. He takes her out on dates. My husband doesn't take me out on dates. They look so happy. We don't look that happy. That's such a dangerous path to go down,
Yes.
because you start telling yourself things that are most likely not true. It's definitely what the enemy wants you to believe.
Yeah, we have this imagination that we can allow to run away with us, and it's just not necessarily the case. There's
Yeah.
there's drama in every family. There's disconnection in every marriage, and we had a lady come up to us and said, "Y'all have the picture perfect marriage." And I was like,
Mm.
"What?" Because I didn't feel that way at all. But that just showed me that people on the outside looking in really can't see everything that's going on. And that was not a social media thing. That was just her observing us at church and things like that. And that was like just about a year before the all hell broke loose in our relationship. And so appearances are not always what they appear to be. So
Yeah.
comparing is no good.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. And just, I want to say that if you recognize these habits within yourself, it doesn't mean you're doomed, but you do need to stop calling them normal. Some of what feels most normal and natural to you may be exactly what's damaging your marriage. So, this is again some self reflection that has to happen. You don't need a different spouse. You just have to have a different marriage, and you have to be committed to that. And you may just need to change your habits.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time. Before we go, if something we talked about today hit close to home, I want you to know there is a free resource waiting for you right now. It's called Before You Make It Worse, and it's exactly what it sounds like. If your spouse has pulled away, said they need space, or the word divorce has come up, this guide will show you the 7 most common mistakes people make in marriage crisis, why they backfire, and what to do instead. It will not fix everything, but it will help you stop making it worse while you figure out your next step. Go to itsnotover.net and grab it for free, and the link is in the show notes. We'll see you next time, and remember, it's not over.